Howdy, y'all. This is Grace Crenhop, and on speech number 3 over an urgent issue in the US, I chose human trafficking just because I was a little bit interested in it already. So, getting into that, I'm not sure if anyone has heard in the past day or two, but Ghislaine Maxwell has been sentenced up to 20 years for uh, trafficking of minor girls in particular, for Jeffrey Epstein. Now, I'm not sure if anyone has a background on this, but Jeffrey Epstein was arrested a few years ago and committed suicide while he was detained for charges of trafficking and having sex with minors, and like a bunch of other like sexual crimes, things like that. Now, the speech is not about them, but that was probably one of the most famous cases I could think of um, to date in the U.S., even though it is a very unfortunate and gruesome situation. Um, but it still happens in the U.S. and across the world, for that matter, and so that is why I think it is urgent. But getting into what human trafficking is, the UN defines it as the recruitment, transportation, transfer, harboring, or receipt of people through force, fraud, or deception with an intention of exploiting them for profit. Now, human trafficking is an urgent problem, and by protecting the border, changing our attitude on missing persons, and raising awareness in community are ways to help combat such an intricate problem. Now, these are just theoretical policies, and in no way, shape, or form do I think they will fix this problem completely, because it is such a very intricate issue and many variables to it. But I think these are ways to help combat the issue. So, getting into some stats about trafficking across the border, in particular the U.S.-Mexico border, 147,000 migrant children are alone whenever they cross, and then 122,000 are taken into U.S. custody and most likely will be placed in some sort of foster care system. Now, a large number of survivors from trafficking at one point or another were in foster care, and I bring up this point because foster care has a lot of issues within it through like abuse and things like that. So if someone were to run away from foster care, then they are put into a more vulnerable position to be trafficked, or if someone who came in like as an immigrant is put into foster care, then they do not know a lot of people or have a lot of family here already. So if they run away or are released by the time they're 18, they are put in a vulnerable stage of getting trafficked into some sort of human trafficking operation. Of course, it's not always going to happen, but they just have a higher likely chance to. And other ways people are trafficked through the border is through single adult men. They pose as parents for kids, and they cross the border. And then according to TexasPolicy.com, they will continue to traffic, and Latin American kids are 60% more likely to be smuggled into child pornography or some sort of other trafficking organization if they cross the border alone or set out on the journey alone, just because they are alone and very vulnerable. That is just a way that it happens. It's not always that way. They won't always, get trafficked. It's just they have a higher chance to. And due to less strict immigration laws, Border Patrol agents have to process as many people as possible, leading to less rigorous process. It is unknown how many victims to date, but it is clear that having looser policies and less federal funding is a way to fuel trafficking. Now, when I say this, I don't mean that like immigration is a problem for trafficking, because it's not. Like, the problem in itself is not immigration. It is less training and less strictness on who comes in to the U.S. And there are certain types of people that you're supposed to look for whenever you're looking for if they're potentially trafficking someone. And with the huge influx of people and less training and less policies for it, then it's more likely for people to slip through the cracks and That is how it happens. Of course, it's not intentional for it to slip through the cracks. That's just the way it is. So through stricter border policies, I am hoping that it'll help the issue. Um, Moving on to runaways, though, and how they are labeled. Um, so whenever I say runaways, it is normally when someone is missing. They could either be labeled missing or runaway, particularly like a teenager or a kid. Um, but there are some police departments. Some people are concerned of police departments that teens are too quickly labeled runaways, even if there is no reason for their disappearance. This is according to an article on CBS. And then Derek Wilson, who is the founder of Black and Missing Children's Foundation, says that law enforcement are more likely to classify Black or Latinos as runaway. So there is a little bit of a negative connotation with labeling as runaway. Um, Firstly, it has this idea that they did something wrong or they're delinquents or dangerous. But in reality, that is not true. And they need to be helped just like anyone else who is missing. But also, it is statistically likely that they will return home within a few days, or at least that is the assumption that some police departments have. Um, but that is a dangerous assumption because they are in fact not a runaway. They're a real missing person, and of course, it is not intentional that they are labeled this way. It is just the fact that they were assumed to be runaway, or that maybe there's some sort of problem at home, so they were just automatically assumed as runaway. But in fact, that they were, on the streets, vulnerable, and they could have been trafficked or had some sort of harm caused to them, even if it wasn't trafficking. But this assumption can lead to, them slipping through the cracks, not being attended for in those statistics of who is getting trafficked. Um, it is just an unfortunate reality that happens. Like I said, there's a negative connotation, and even if they are assumed to return home in a few days, that does not always happen, and then these people are just, never return home, and then there's, nothing found on them, and then there is that chance that they're trafficked. So I'm going to move forward into some ways that people do get trafficked. According to the UN, there could be false jobs online that are posted, online predators, just plain out kidnapping, coercion, and false promises. And these are not all the ways, these are just some ways. And then according to NCJRS, 200,000 kids are at risk for being trafficked into sex industries, and that's just sex industries. That is not, the whole umbrella of trafficking. It just goes to show how urgent the problem is. And, that is a large number of people. So, it's very disappointing. But in Texas, there are actually, there's a foundation called of Trafficking, Partners in Combating Trafficking, and they also are partnered with other agencies, such as the DOJ, that is a federal though, Office of Texas Governor's Child Sex Trafficking Team. And I do believe that and there are more agencies, of course, but I do believe that these agencies could lobby for safer borders and more training of agents of recognizing the signs of who could potentially be trafficking. They could also help promote trafficking knowledge, because at least I know in myself is that in school, I never really learned about it. I just learned about it through research on my own. But I think that research of anyone is valuable, but also just communities and schools promoting the knowledge to just help, relieve communities and give them ways to know the signs of it. Now, with that being said, it's a very intricate problem, but I think through having safer borders, more training, and community outreach, then it can at least relieve some of the issues.